to do a radical hysterectomy at 26. She had just been married 6 months at that time. And so it was like all of a sudden this kind of words and concepts and things were coming into my world that I never thought, like surrogacy, right? My first thought at 19 to my older sister was, don't worry, I'll have a baby for you. Not really knowing what that meant at the time. Of course, this was 1997. And that it wasn't really a thing then. So through that whole process, seeing her deal with hormones and early menopause at that time, and then in my 20s, I was working with a lot of women who were telling me, who were in their 40s that were struggling to get pregnant, saying, freeze your eggs. And I was like, what are you even talking about right now? I'm building my career. I'm traveling the world. I had met my first husband at that point. Fast forward to age 30, I had gotten divorced and went to go freeze my eggs. I went to the fertility doctor and said, this is something I want to do. And he said, you're too young, come back later. And I was like, what? Is there such a thing as being too young? Now they wouldn't really tell you that at this time and point where we are now, because technology has changed. So again, I started diving into that at that age, at 30, and I'm now 46 at the time we are now. And went back at 36 to freeze my eggs. So I froze 11 eggs, did the IVF process at that time on my own. I always said it was kind of like I had my 401k and I had my eggs frozen, and I was like doing my thing as you're supposed to be, a good citizen, not really knowing what was in store for me. I was very single at that time and whatnot. And it wasn't like a burning, yearning desire for me to have babies. It was really just what I thought I should do. And fast forward to 38 and a half, that's when it started to click in of like, oh my gosh, here I've been gallivanting, doing my thing. And now I better shape up if I want to have this happen. Mind you, still single. So like, what do you really do at that point? And again, a very different conversation now, even, 7 years ago, for people doing it on their own. But I ended up meeting my current husband at 39 and a half, and it was all very quick. And I remember when we met, I had just started the process of dealing with fibroids. So I didn't know what that was going to mean for my fertility. I knew I was going to have a surgery, and pretty much was like, I want to have children. Obviously, I'm getting older. This could be a pretty gnarly road to go down. Are you willing to do this? And he was. And luckily, after that first surgery, I got pregnant with my first son, and I delivered him at 41. I had this idea in my head that the age wasn't really a thing. And that's what I kind of tell people. We have a joke in my family that I don't realize how old I am, because at my last baby, I was almost 44. I was going to a fetal medicine doctor because I had a severe placenta situation happening. So every week I was going for monitoring and whatnot. And every week you have to put your age, what medication you were on, and if anything had changed from the previous week. So I was very aware of putting my age down every week. And one day, 2 weeks before I was delivering, my husband he was looking over my shoulder, and he's like, "You're not 42." I'm like, "What do you mean I'm not 42? You're not 42, you're 43. And in fact, I was 2 months away from being 44. So that's how delusional about like absent-minded I was for my age. And I think part of that helps, because I really wasn't accepting this age, number, quality of eggs, even though I had gone to a doctor that said you should do egg donation because of my age. He didn't even look at my history or anything. And there was something in me that knew that wasn't the right path for us. And I went on to have my third baby, second and third maybe after I saw him. But anyway, so long story short, after my first miscarriage is when I really transitioned my 10-year life coaching business at that time to solely focus into fertility. And it happened kind of naturally through people coming to me saying, I have a friend who's going through IVF. I know that you did this. Can you talk to her? And or a miscarriage and whatnot. So here we are since 2017, doing this full time now.
Did your sister ever end up having kids in one way or another?
No, she didn't. Unfortunately, again, the technology then compared to what it is now is very different. And it was essentially she's actually the only person, this is quite a testament to a miracle as we believe in our family. She's the only person living on the planet that has survived this type of cancer ever. So,
wow.
yeah,
Okay.
it's pretty crazy.
I mean, and your life is more important. It's so okay. So
Yeah.
I love the next thing I want to talk about is your attitude about being older, because I went through infertility at 20 and had my first baby at 21, and it just was. I knew it was what I wanted to do. It was totally normal. I look at my kids that are 21, and I'm like, please, please don't have a baby. Like, please.
Yeah.
But I just really think it's your attitude about your age and your desire for what you want, and like it was perfect for me. It was perfect for me. And I wanted to be a really young mom and be done by the time I was 30.
Yeah. I mean, I think I when I was younger, that's what I wanted to. I think I had this idea. I think most people do. And I envy the people that had their children younger and have this life after still, because even this morning, I'm like carrying my 2-year-old up and down the stairs. I'm like, I'm too old to be doing this, my body hurts. So there's pluses and minuses to both.
Yeah.
Things, I think. But I always say it doesn't matter if you're 21 or 41, if you want a baby, that feeling inside is still the same. And don't let any doctor, anybody discount that for you, because it doesn't change how you feel inside about that. That knowing, as I say.
And I love that you brought that up and that I felt the same way at a completely different age. How fantastic is that as women? You mentioned you had a miscarriage. Was that before you had your son?
No, I was after my first son.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had this false sense of like, oh, everything is easy and good. And then it happened very undramatic, I guess, as far as, I went to the bathroom, had a very small, the size of a quarter, a nickel, red blood, and called my doctor at 9:30 at night. And he, was basically, well, you can come in tomorrow if you want, but just another day at the office for them. And that's what I say. Like, it's life-changing for us, and for them, it's just the way of the world. And unfortunately, that was my first miscarriage, and that really changed my life.
And it is, I mean, here's the thing, from a logical, point of view after the fact, right? 2020, we have 2020 vision now. There's nothing they could do anyway.
100%.
I mean, even if you go in, even if they're super empathetic, even if they hug you and cry with you, and it does not change anything. There's nothing that can be done.
Yeah.
And so I always think, it is just another day for them. And also, and what as a woman do I want? Because there's really nothing that person can do. And it's hard to rectify that when you're going through it, for sure.
Yeah.
You had all natural pregnant, like you just got naturally pregnant. What happened to the frozen eggs?
Unfortunately, they didn't make it.
Oh,
no.
I mean,
after our second miscarriage is when we realized, okay, let's thaw those eggs and see if maybe we can use them now. And out of the 11, 8 did not make the thaw. I'm sorry. 3 did. And then they go through a process of they try to fertilize those 3. And then it's called to get it to blast, which is the first 3 days of that cell division. And they didn't make it past those 3 days. So again, for anybody who's listening, there is a very small difference now between freezing eggs and freezing embryos. When I was doing it, you were much better off freezing embryos versus freezing eggs because of the thawing process. An embryo generally thaws better than an egg based on the composition of the sperm and the egg together and what that makes as an embryo versus just the consistency of an egg. Again, it is much better than it was before, but I think there is still a slight difference, maybe like a 5% chance or 5% better chance of an embryo thawing versus an egg.
How crazy that we even have these conversations. I mean, like,
no,
we're talking about thawing embryos. How crazy. Like, that's amazing. It was, so you were pregnant with your son, had 2 miscarriages. Yeah.
Well, had 1 miscarriage, another son, and another miscarriage.
So, and then you had your 3rd child. Okay. So are we done?
100%.
Oh, see, I didn't expect that. I thought you were like, well, I don't know. Let's just keep going.
No. Pregnancy was not easy for me. It
Okay.
really wasn't. I had the previous that were pretty stressful. I couldn't pick up the other ones because of that. I don't know if anybody's listening who's not familiar with the placenta previa, but depending on how much you have it, it's essentially, like I was told, if you are bleeding, it's a 911 call to the emergency room. You could essentially bleed out because of the amount of blood that's going through the placenta. So that, and just it wasn't easy, and then therefore the births weren't easy. The last one especially, you know, lots of blood transfusions and not sure if they're going to be able to save my uterus and all these crazy situation, and babies in NICU for my last two. And so the whole process was not an easy road to go through. So just from an emotional standpoint, and for my husband, I think him more so than me, actually, he's, you know, has quite a bit of PTSD. When we're watching something on TV or whatever, he'll tear up. He gets really, you can just physically see, you know, he gets nervous when he's seeing it for other people, even of being there, wondering how that's all going to go down. So no, we're done.
Take me through the pregnancies in a little more detail. I want people to hear your story of what that struggle was like. If you had natural childbirth, I'm guessing you had C-sections.
I had planned C-sections for all. Yeah.
Yeah. Because of placenta previa, it's a wise idea. I mean, and how hard was that? Did you feel like you were giving something up and not being able to have a natural childbirth? Did you just feel like you were so blessed, period? It didn't matter. And then once you have a C-section and placenta previa and you're more prone to that, you know your chances in subsequent pregnancies. So take us down that road. And and then you can at some point dive into that first miscarriage and how that really shifted your coaching business. Because it's interesting. I mean, you've been married and you think before you get married, it's going to be this really huge transition. And I'm not minimizing the transition of living full time with another human being and sharing your life, getting divorced, you know, like the whole thing. That is life changing, but it's nothing compared to having a child.
Nothing compared to having a child and or fertility, right? Not knowing if you can have a child.
Right.
You know, that's the one thing I say. You've heard of people with getting divorced. You've heard how people deal with maybe the big things, buying a house, losing their job, having a death in the family, all of these things. Nobody talks about fertility and or infertility and or miscarriage. I mean, I believe it's being talked about more, which I'm really happy about, because I really believe that having that awareness and education around it helps other people go through it and realize, oh, this is a thing, this is common, and you know, it's okay, and I will be okay. So I think that whole narrative that's happening now is amazing and so helpful for the people that are going through it now. So I'm sorry, we were backing up to.
Yeah, you got pregnant. So your husband was on board with this and you got pregnant naturally pretty quickly too.
Yes. So I basically, after I healed from my myomectomy, which is the fibroid surgery, it was, okay, you're 40 now, you need to try right away.
Yep.
And of course I was nervous about that, because I don't know what's to come. Is this a year-long process that it's going to take? Is it going to happen right away? And literally happened right away. I was traveling for work in the Westin Hotel in Atlanta, and my husband was traveling somewhere at the time too. And I had the 3 pregnancy tests I did in the hotel bathroom, and I'll never forget. I literally got on my knees in the hotel room and thanked God. Like, I couldn't believe it. You know, it still brings tears to my eyes to this day, because it really felt like such a miracle that to have gone through the surgery and all these things, and then like first try and that happened. Yeah. So again, I had this the naive sense of pregnancy the first time, even with the issues of, I was followed by my reproductive endocrinologist, which is the fertility doctor, even though I had him naturally, because I had the fibroid surgery, and that doctor is the one that helped me through that as well. So I was fortunate that those first 12 weeks, I was able to see him develop and everything. And it was really fun and exciting and all of that good stuff. And then it wasn't until we started to get to the end, that previous issues were happening. And then it was mainly actually for the first baby, why we had the the planned C-section was because I had the fibroid surgery. So they say that the weakness of the uterus, they don't want to put the uterus into labor where it's contracting in the event that in those areas where there were so many holes done from the surgery that it would be weak and essentially explode is the word that they use, which sounds really
Perfect.
strange. But
Yeah. You want an exploding uterus, right? Yeah. Avoiding exploding uteruses is important, I feel, in life. Yeah, I mean that's huge, and that's interesting. They weren't worried about you having a lower chance of being, not that it matters, but because you got pregnant, but were they concerned that there was a lower chance or complications because of the holes from where the fibroids were removed? Because everything's about the uterine wall.
No, they weren't.
Okay, awesome.
And that's why I often say to people who are doing fibroid surgeries or endometriosis, any of those things, ovarian surgeries, whatever. I went to and this is because of the reproductive endocrinologist, I went to a gynecological oncologist who is a doctor that specializes in cancer, mainly because they have the best technology. You want to make sure that you're not creating more scar tissue in the surgeries that you're having in order to do one thing and then in fact you're undoing another situation because of that. So I wasn't concerned about that because I knew they knew what they were doing, right? I have heard a lot of stories, unfortunately, though, Jen, that have been the opposite of they go in for this, but then it ends up having more issues because of something else. So really find out when you're doing those types of gynecological surgeries, what type of technology and tools they're using, so that you have that awareness that you're getting the best quality that you can.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so that part at least is good, but you knew that it was going to be a C-section from the go. There was it wasn't like I thought I'm going to have natural childbirth and then boom, emergency. Okay, so it was planned. How did that go? How did the surgery go, the delivery?
So, and you kind of asked before, I'm remembering now, I was just blessed to have this pregnancy.
Right.
So I wasn't worried about not having a natural childbirth or anything. It was that we kind of skipped all over that. Like, thank God I'm pregnant. I have a healthy child. So however is the best way to get him out without exploding the uterus. Right. So like the vaginal birth isn't even a consideration. Like, who cares about that? And that was how I was thinking.
Good.
However, I had one sister that had done 2 home births that went not well at all. I had another sister that had done 2 C-sections, one that wasn't planned. Her first wasn't planned. So she labored and then had her C-section. And then the second one that was planned, she said it was amazing. She would do it again. It was so easy. Her recovery was easy, whatever. So these were my 2 baseline situations to go off of. So I was like, okay, it's going to be easy. It's going to be fine. C-section was not easy for me. Unfortunately, it was painful during it, during the surgery. In fact, I can like literally remember as I'm talking about it, that moment exactly, the feeling and all of that. And then after was really hard. My body just did not react to any of the medications well. I was having lots of clotting. It wasn't easy. On top of like, I wasn't feeding him, like feeding wasn't going well. There was just a lot of things. It wasn't easy. And then once we left the hospital on day 4 after the C-section, we had to take him back to a chalk hospital for jaundice because he wasn't eating. Like, so the whole experience of those first 2 weeks was really not easy. And then unfortunately, I had really severe PTSD with the C-section for my second one. I was in a full-blown panic, anxiety, did not want to do this because I knew what my experience was. Like, why would I want to sign up for this when this is what my experience was? I had changed doctors that second time, not because the other doctor did anything wrong, just because of location. And I went from a male doctor the first time to a female doctor the second time. And my husband, again, he's watching these surgeries, right? So he's observing. And he said the second one, the women, they really did finesse it differently. And it was so much better. It was just no pain. It was super easy. The scar was better. Even, I mean, everything about it was way, way different. So, yeah, it
I
was
mean,
better.
that's great. It's great because you hear, I mean, there are horror stories on all sides. And you
Yeah.
said something earlier about how women don't talk about things. And like, it starts when our girls have their period and are embarrassed or buying pads or
Mhm.
tampons. Like, why? Every female that
No.
you see from the age of somewhere around 12 to 15 until their 50s all does the same thing every single month. Why is there
I know.
embarrassment or any negative feeling about something your body does naturally? And I think it starts there. We don't talk about periods. We don't talk about sex. We don't prepare our kids well enough for lots
Yeah.
of situations. We don't talk about pregnancy and miscarriage. And it's so sad because women should be banding together and they don't. So I'm thrilled that you had such a good experience with a female doctor and that it makes sense that you have this baby inside you. It's not like you can go back. Like, actually, I'd like to cancel my order. Like that's
Got to come out.
it's got to come out, and we don't want the
Yeah.
exploding uterus still.
Yes.
So
Yeah. No, and I think to your point, I mean, my friends that have teenage daughters, I'm like, these are the conversations you have. Not only is it about the period, but ovulation.
yeah,
I mean, I was never taught that. What does that even mean? When is like cervical mucus? Are you having
yeah,
it or is it not? Why is it different? All of those things. And everybody thinks their period is normal, but most people do not have a normal period. So even that, what is
right.
that like? Are you having painful periods? There's a reason that it's painful. Something's off with your hormones. So don't just get on the pill to mask that. Let's figure out now so that when you do want to have children, you're ahead of the game to know really what's going on. So I think to your point, everybody's having the same experience and we're just not talking about it. But I think we are starting to talk about it a little bit
Yes,
more.
I agree.
But I think it needs to even be extended to that. So talking about it and then educating even more about the ovulation and all those other things so that again when they're getting to that point of wanting to conceive, they're aware of that. Because what kills me is like you spend so much time feeding your kids organic food, but then when they're 14 you put them on the pill because of their period. Like, okay, well, you're just putting a hormone in there and you've been trying to avoid hormones for all this time. And, what is that going to do to your reproductive system? Because you're basically shutting it down and saying, we don't want you to function.
Right. So much we could go on so much, and I love you just totally switched gears into coaching completely, totally did. So you did have the second experience. I mean, you had a miscarriage, you had the second experience that was better. You're not so afraid that you didn't want to keep going because you had another miscarriage and a third baby.
Yeah. I had this crazy knowing that I was meant to have 3 children.
Mm.
It wasn't about me collecting babies or wanting babies. And I kept trying to tell people this because I would hear all the, why are you doing this again? You're old, your eggs, it's going to keep happening, whatever. And it was this drive. And even my husband was like, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust that you have that whatever this feeling is that you had, it was about getting these souls together. And, for whatever that was, it was way bigger than me. And so it was this determination to keep going until I got that. And that's why I was so determined when you asked if I'd have another. It was like, no, because I finished whatever that was. I don't know. It was this drive and yearning and wanting for these 3 to be together. And then as soon as the 3 were together, it was like, okay, that left me. They're on to the next thing of desire,
Right.
or whatever it may be. But that's why when people say to me, I have one, so I should be grateful. I always say one doesn't discount wanting a family or more than one, so don't feel bad about the fact that you want more than one. We can help you to get there. It's just sometimes people are meant to feel bad about that and feel like, oh, just be grateful that you have one. And it's not that we're not grateful that we have one. It's that we
No.
want more than that for our life and for their lives.
Yeah, I agree. And one's the hardest, I think. And yeah, I mean, you do have that knowing, and let's not discount that because I knew some kids were coming before they were, like, I just really felt in tune with that. And don't discount that either. Yeah, it's not like you're not grateful for what you have. It does not change the fact that you would have something different if you could moving forward. So I
Yeah.
love that. And I think on top of having conversations and education, then there's the support piece too, which you do in your coaching. I mean, let's be very clear about that. But I think there's a lack of support that women have, woman to woman, in like, oh, you had a miscarriage. I know what that feels like, and I'm here to support you, even though every woman's journey is a little different, right?
Right.
And I know that that is part of your coaching, and that is why. Let's jump into that a little bit more. And then I want to talk about having 3 kids under the age of 6 at 46.
Well, there were
No, I'm
3
off.
under 3. I had the 3
Oh,
within 3 years. Yeah.
like that's insane at any age.
Oh, yeah. And all boys. So I'm like, okay,
Oh, all
what is
right.
happening right now? And I'm one of 4 girls. So I'm like so out of my element.
That's the way it's supposed to be. I feel you on that. So jump in. You had the miscarriage, you had the birth experience, and then you had the miscarriage, and you shared a little bit of that, and you were already a coach for a decade.
Yeah. I
So
was a life coach
okay.
for a decade before that. Yes. Mm-hmm.
What that triggered something within you. It doesn't sound like it was like a traumatic miscarriage. I don't even know if that's the right way to say it, but some of them are much more emotional
Right.
or physical than others. So jump into that.
Yeah, it was not traumatic in that sense where people, if it happens at home or they have the tissue pass with them, that wasn't the case. I had as a DNC after that miscarriage. And actually that's where we were in the bed at the clinic to do the DNC, and there was a sheet between us and the next bed 4 feet from us. They were doing their first retrieval that day. So they were so excited and I was
Oh,
so devastated. And that's when I knew, like, we need to start showing up in this way to help support people on both sides, because I had been through IVF and I knew I genuinely was so excited for this couple. But I also was the story that I was writing in my head about this family is now gone. And, making sense of that was not possible at that time. And I just wanted somebody to tell me it was going to be okay. And I would go on to have other children. And this is, and I didn't have that at the time. And that's why I felt so strongly about moving forward in this way. I had gone to see a therapist that specialized in miscarriage, because, again, I didn't know anybody to call to say, how are you doing? How did it feel? Did you have another baby after what was happening? And I'll never forget, my husband was parked outside on the curb and I was crying even harder out to see him than I was walking in there, because I felt like this particular therapist, and I know lots of therapists are different, but had, quite a boundary of not really saying what her story was, right? So I didn't know if she had any children. I didn't know if she had had a miscarriage. I didn't know anything about it. It was more of like, how does that feel? Well, it doesn't feel great. I'm just looking for hope, right? That's what I was looking for. I was searching for somebody to understand me, hear me, see me, tell me it was going to be okay, and give me some hope. And now that's what we do as coaches, is show up for people in that way. And people that are going through early pregnancy after loss have a sense of PTSD that is very real. You're constantly checking every time you go to the bathroom. Is there blood? Is, something feeling weird? You're not going through pregnancy the same as somebody who has had a really fine, normal pregnancy with no issues, because you're constantly waiting for this shoe to drop. Mm-hmm. So working with a coach or somebody that's able to help you through that process to really find the joy and relax in those first, for some people it's 12 weeks, for some it's 24 weeks. There's no judgment or time on that. It's everybody's individual, but it is important to seek help during that time, especially if you've had a loss and you're nervous about it.
I want to kind of wrap up on this same thread, because of your experience. You not only changed your coaching, but you also certify other people to become coaches. And so for the mamas out there, a lot of whom have experienced one or many or pieces of your story, to become a coach, what does that look like? Because I actually have your information up, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah, I'm the way that I see it is just a ripple effect. There's 1 in 8 in America that's suffering from infertility, 1 in 6 in Canada, and the worldwide, worldwide, we're on a 6-year decline of fertility. Mm-hmm. I really believe that we just need emotional support going through this, and emotional support, but also curated support. So everybody is a genius at their own experience, right? So somebody can say, I have PCOS, and so I know that inside and out, and I can help the next person on that, which is amazing. But when you go through a coaching process, you are able to learn a broader view of how to help and serve and support people that are going through any sort of fertility, and or if they're just trying to get pregnant naturally. I always say my ideal client is someone 6 months before they're trying to conceive, because we can get them primed up, we can get their body ready to go, and kind of see what might be the red flags to get ahead of before they have to say, oh, I'm having this issue or that issue or whatnot. So helping people to coach others is such a passion of mine, because people need help. It's like I said before earlier in the show, this is not something that we are prepared for in our life. It's nobody talks about this. Nobody says, oh, I struggled with this. We're only just at the first next generation of people going through IVF and egg donation and all of these things. So there really isn't the people before us, our mothers, grandmothers, and whatever, that can say, we've gone through this, let me help you. So being able to, even if you've had all your children naturally super easy, that is such a gift to be able to help somebody else, to encourage them through the process. And again, through miscarriage loss and or late loss, or even stillborn, all of those things, there's a place for support for so many people, and it is happening, unfortunately, more than we know. I always say, like, if you're in line at Starbucks, take a look at who's there and just count the numbers, and you can do the math to say how many people there, men and women, that are suffering through some sort of either loss or infertility at that time. And the more that we talk about it, the more that we help others, the more that they can get through it easier, faster, more successfully. And then the next people feel like they're not alone, because they're going to say, oh, I heard somebody who went through this and they can help you. And, they don't feel like it's such a weight of the world on their shoulders.
Elizabeth, thank you for sharing like your coaching and how to become a coach. So vital for the people out there that have that experience, that want to give back. But thank you so much for sharing 3 kids in 3 years, 5 pregnancies.
Yeah.
In 3 years.
Yeah.
Over the age of 40. Holy cow. I feel tremendously blessed to have learned your story. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.